Hi, thanks for being with us tonight. We're going to begin with breaking news in the war with Iran. The U.S. has launched more strikes tonight, just hours after President Trump claimed the ceasefire with Iran is over. According to U.S. Central Command, the additional strikes are an effort to further degrade Iran's ability to threaten freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. has struck dozens of sites across the country in recent days in response to Iran hitting 3 commercial vessels moving through the vital shipping route. Iran's Revolutionary Guard claimed late last night that it responded to U.S. aggression by launching strikes against more than 80 targets across the Gulf region. And while President Trump says he doesn't think the war will start again, he isn't certain what future negotiations could look like.
They're not doing a service to the people. And I think more than anything else is I got to know them. And I'm not sure I want to make a deal with them. We can play games, but I'm not sure I want to make a deal. I just finished the job.
The cost of oil jumped following last night's strikes. The U.S. benchmark West Texas Intermediate is trading at about $73 a barrel. Brent crude, which is the dominant global benchmark, is trading at roughly $77 per barrel. The president just wrapped a 2-day NATO summit in Turkey. During the visit, he lashed out against Western allies, saying he was, quote, very upset with the alliance. He also took time to sit down separately with his Turkish, Syrian, and Ukrainian counterparts. During his meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Trump offered to give Kyiv the right to produce its Patriot missile defense system in order to defend itself against Russian ballistic missile attacks. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first let's bring in CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. So Charlie, President Trump says he doesn't think the war will start again, but both sides are exchanging strikes. Can you make sense of that for us? Are we back at war?
Well, Lindsay, it certainly doesn't look like any kind of ceasefire is holding. And I have to frame exactly what we're seeing here, because you and I have discussed when we've seen these ceasefire violations over the past few weeks and months. This is next level. After what happened last night, I called Central Command and said, give me an idea of the frame of reference on a scale of what we've been seeing in the past 24 hours. This is before this new wave and what we saw in the past. I said 4 or 5 times worse. They said no, 8 to 10 times worse. Wow. Much more targeting, going after radar installations, going after those boats. And that's what we're seeing from CENTCOM, that video that you see right there. Then I was told we're actually going to widen this. CENTCOM is going to widen the strikes along the Strait of Hormuz, along parts of the Gulf, areas that hadn't been hit before. A lot of the Revolutionary Guard sites themselves, the barracks, etc. So this is a dramatic escalation, and it happened after Iran fired at 3 ships trying to pass through that Strait of Hormuz in a place that they didn't feel comfortable that they were going through that particular passageway. They said they warned the ships, and they opened fire, a couple missiles, a drone, and they then retaliated overnight by going after U.S. facilities in Kuwait and Bahrain. So what we've seen in the past 24, 36 hours was a lot like the war itself, with the United States attacking Iranian positions and Iran retaliating back. And I think what we need to know now is, after this, which is still underway, by the way, these attacks are still ongoing, how Iran is going to retaliate, as they have already threatened to do. And then we will see what the military calls an escalation ladder. If Iran retaliates, what then comes next from the United States, or whether this is an entire resumption of hostilities between these two.
What is your read? Is Iran just flagrantly ignoring the MOU, or is the MOU vague enough that it is allowing space for this kind of action in the Strait?
Yeah, well, okay, so when we're talking about the MOU, after the attacks on those ships, the United States rescinded a waiver that would have allowed Iran to trade oil. That was really an escalation in itself, not a shooting escalation, but an escalation. Now, because if you're going to enforce that, meaning you're going to stop ships from going in, then you're talking about the blockade going in. So, yes, not to take sides, but what started this, or the event that started this, was Iran opening fire on commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, absolutely against the MOU. Then the United States says, we're going to take that waiver away from you. And now we've seen this military escalation.
We're going to have more on that waiver later in the show. Charlie D'Agata, thank you so much.